well deserve to know. And that's why I think you all should be in the driver's seat for massive projects like these that can fundamentally change the livelihoods, the atmosphere, the character of these communities. So let's go to the next one. Okay, I was told that water was a major concern here, so the next few slides are going to kind of do a fairly deeper dive on what these look like. So as I mentioned, one hyperscale data center, these are major water suckers. A lot of the ones we've observed, again, we're talking worst case scenario here, 5 million gallons of water per day, potentially. Right? These are questions that we need to be asking. Louisa County, this is the ones that I actually just mentioned, 620 gallons of water per day for its 2 new campuses, 620 gallons per day for 2 campuses. And that is more, that's about 2,066 households. Like, that's the equivalent amount. Caroline County, if the Amazon data center campus would be built there, 2.63 million gallons of water per day. Loudoun County, which again, most of the data centers we have on planet Earth are there, 1.6 billion gallons of water was used in 2023. And I believe we have new numbers on that, that's actually gone up. Is that right, Paige? Yeah, it's plus or minus a few more hundreds of thousands. Sorry, not minus, plus. Let's go to the next one. I hate being the bummer guy, but I promise there's some hopeful things in here too. All right, water usage again. So this is a graph, we can't really see it. This is billions of liters per year and projected growth of these. So right now, in 2020, the last one we saw was 2022, this is globally about 50 liters of water for hyperscale data centers alone, 50 billion liters of water. And by 2028, if data center growth is not disrupted, or safeguards for data center growth aren't put in place adjacent to the development, we are looking at over 300 billion. 300 billion with a B, liters, gallons, for hyperscale data centers alone. And the next one, this is talking about water quality risks. Okay, so water can't be looked at in a vacuum. It can't just be like how much is taken out. What is it used to be able to just cool the data centers? There's multiple ways to cool data centers, by the way. Some of them have better trade-offs. There's things like closed loop systems that are true closed loop systems that kind of prevent a lot of the things that I'm talking about, which is something, again, we should look into. But sometimes they'll say something like closed loop system when it's not truly, it's a hybrid or whatever. If it's that, you run the risk of these things. Every data center, if it's using water, for the pipes, for the ways to sanitize and cool down everything, sediment builds up, right? It's moving through metal, it's moving through wires, it's moving through industrial sites. Those kind of things build up not just sediment, physical things, but also chemicals that are used for cleaning, that are used for sanitation, that are used for that. That can build up. It's one of the worst things. It's one of the trade-offs we have for industrial projects, right? And again, there's ways to clean this up, but at the scale of a data center is a tough challenge to acknowledge. So there's something called flow down, which is when they use all that water, eventually they have to discharge the dirtiest water somewhere. That'll go into a water treatment plant, which I hope it does. But you also have to suck up a bunch of water to get there. Now this is where well water comes in. If you're using it from a local waterway, you're losing it from your local water sources. If you're doing that in data centers, you can increase sedimentation because you're decreasing what they call water tables, which is part of like the quality and amount that is in the groundwater, and that can deplete and make well water worse. It can. And this is just a list of some of the things. Biocides, such as chlorine. There's heavy metals that can end up in these water sources, again, from zinc, copper, and chromium. And part of this, in a vacuum, again, why it can't be looked at in a vacuum is like, is a data center going to upgrade your water treatment plant? Because the filtration system is now going to have a lot more to need. It's going to have to work a lot harder. Is your county already working on those things? Are you maxed out? Do you have new water sources? These are the things, or new water sources that are planned for the intensified amount and multiplicity of the water being used. Those are questions to ask. Let's go to the next one. Now, again, according to most analysis, not from just Virginia, but also from the Virginia chapter, but also several different policy think tanks, the industry itself, water quality and access is not the #1 dictation of where data centers go. It's usually cheap electricity. Now, in Virginia, we already have a lot of incentives for data centers. $1.5 billion in tax incentives was given to data centers, the data center industry in 2023. So they already have a lot of incentives to come here just on the tax front. The other side is cheaper electricity. Dominion's rates can be negotiated with bigger customers. I wish families had that same luxury, but we don't. So they intend to pay less. And like I said before, the cheapest electricity is not going to be the ones where you have to pay for transmission lines to go several miles away. They're going to be the ones located in communities already. And that saves them money. We're talking about market forces here. We're talking about the incentives that are going to, which makes places like this a viable, interesting location for them. So I get it. Look, we'll just take a quick thing. Like, we live in a society where industry wants to make profits. That is what they're designed to do. But we also live in a democratic society, which means that we should have representation as well. Our voices should matter as well. If we see these things and understand how the market force is there, we should be able to figure out how to do that in harmony. I don't think that's unreasonable. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, this is a case study. Again, we're talking about worst case scenarios, things you want to absolutely prevent here in Central Virginia. Newton, Georgia, it's a Meta data center campus. In 2018, they started breaking ground. 2 years later, after the campus was built, some of the taps were starting to run dry. The water pressure was getting lower. And all of a sudden, the color of the water started to turn darker. That's a picture, it's a real picture from the New York Times of a family that they were observing of what their water looked like. Now, some of the half the taps in a lot of these houses in 1,000 homes don't work. Now, I have to say this so that Meta doesn't sue me, because, they clearly know who I am. But Meta did pay for a study that they said, oh no, it's very unlikely that it was your fault. I just want to say that. Meta paid for their study, and it said it was very unlikely that it was their fault. This is another side of things that drives us nuts, folks, is when an industry gets to pay for a study, the study might tend to look a little bit more in their favor. I might be ugly, but my mom's always going to call me handsome too. I told you there'd be a little lighter humor. But at the end of the day, we think independent analysis is important, and maybe some elected officials could be part of that. Maybe groups like ours can figure out what those look like. But to trust the industry at its word when its end goal is to please their shareholders and make profits, maybe that's what you want to do, but that's not good enough for me. Maybe that's what elected officials might be okay with doing, but I think with something that is of this sheer size, this sheer scale, at this potential massive impact, it is okay to ask to look under every single nook and cranny to make sure that these things aren't developed in a way that sells you out. Let's go to the next slide. This is where we get into air quality now, and then we're almost done too, so I can take some questions. But air quality, this is one of the things we as the chapter are very concerned. Air quality is my level of expertise. My colleagues generally work on PhDs better at the water side of things, but like I mentioned, these are shipping container-sized diesel generators. There are a lot of them on site, several dozen at minimum, several hundred at maximum. Diesel generators, now they can leak toxic chemicals, right? Like diesel generators may be used for energy, for supplemental energy, and all those things, but when they're close to homes, when they are close to playgrounds, when they are close to schools, it bothers me. We have a problem with that because of the pollution that leaks out. Some of those things are benzene that causes chronic respiratory illness, PM2.5, which is pollution so small that you can't see it, you can't really smell it, but it can bypass your lungs and go straight into your bloodstream, and even arsenic is found in those things. And the EPA itself, because this is another thing that the industry will say. Again, industry is going to say the industry thinks. I'm going to tell you the other side of what's unsaid. The industry will say two things. These are part of the rigorous standards of the EPA. The EPA has not upgraded their safeguards and recommendations that are binding in over a decade. Medical community after medical community says diesel generation pollution, no amount of it is safe because of the chemicals I just talked about, but also it is especially at risk for people who are elderly, people who are already sick, and children. There's an awful lot of data centers that are built right next to playgrounds in Fairfax and Loudoun County. They can be powered with alternative sources. They can be powered with battery storage on site. It just costs more money. We are talking about trillion-dollar industries. They can build these things in a way that doesn't come with the trade-off of making any of us, especially our children, sick. They just have a trend of not doing that. The EPA has also said, you can go to the next slide. This is just about the California Resources Board, about like even just 1 hour of diesel pollution can be the equivalent of, 300 kilowatts, like I mentioned. Try not to get too much in the science. Like, just several, it can be the equivalent of 1 hour driving behind a semi-truck, like tailpipe pollution, just being right there. If they're on for an extended period of time, at just 300 kilowatts is a fraction of what I said before about the nuclear. Okay, go to the next slide. When they all kick on, this is from Loudoun County, this summer. Even though they'll all be used for emergency power, the community wasn't told about this. That smoke plume is from all the diesel generators from that data center. The community wasn't informed that those were going to be kicked on. They were driving to work. All of a sudden, they see giant smoke plumes. Some people thought that the buildings were literally on fire. That is what it looks like if they all kick on all the time. And the auxiliary power thing, by the way, the emergency power thing, I hope that they tell you that that excludes maintenance. DEQ, Virginia Department of Environmental Quality, they allow diesel generators to be on for 500 hours a year. Each one, not the whole site, each one, 500 hours a year. They do that for maintenance, they do it for testing, make sure they're working. But like I said, proximity is key here. If this is located in your neighborhoods, if this is located in your schools, I think that poses, I don't think it's a bold claim to say that poses a health risk, especially to children. Let's go to the next slide. This is about noise. Again, decibel levels. I think the common industry claim is that it'll be under 65 decibels. That's about the equivalent of a conversation between two people. Yeah, that's fine, but if it's not, and there's been places where independent studies and measurements of these things have gone over 70 decibels. It's the common measurement used for just how sound it is, how much sound will, how loud something is. Even constant noise at smaller levels can cause bodily stressors that can cause chronic illness or just like changes in your livelihood, well-being, including sleep disturbance, hearing loss, cardiovascular disease, higher blood pressure. All of this, by the way, I don't think any of this doesn't make sense. If something is a constant annoyance in your ear, it can still have a toll on your body, even if it's not going to be a hearing loss. Yeah, but again, this is where the accountability thing comes in. They will say, we'll keep it under 65. Okay, but what have you done? And also, how are we going to measure this? When are we going to measure this? Is it going to be all the time? Is it going to be at these hours? Is it going to be in the middle of the afternoon when people aren't using it as much, but it's going to go up, or it'll be in the dead of night when we know people's on their beds, they're not using their technology enough? What is the measurement? What is the accountability? How do you get peace of mind from these things? And how is that reflected in the contract we have with developers? That's our questions. That's what we think at a bare minimum needs to be done. We go to the next slide.